Nowadays, everybody's got to go to shrinks and counselors and go on Sally Jesse Raphael and talk about their problems. Whatever happened to Gary Cooper? The strong, silent type. That was an American.
The idea of masculinity in film today is almost unrecognizable from what it used to be. When strength, honor, and dignity take a back seat, we find ourselves asking what happened to Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper was always considered a man's man, the picture of masculinity. He represented a culture of strength and duty that has mostly disappeared today. Our Gary Cooper today might be someone like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or someone from the Marvel movies, but what do we get out of that? What values are we extracting from something like Jumanji or Jumanji 2? Or that movie where he jumps off a big ass building and takes his shirt off. There's more people than just The Rock, but he's a good example since he's in everything, and that seems to be the picture of masculinity that Hollywood is pushing today. He's someone who's an impossibly big bodybuilder that nobody can achieve naturally without steroids, when Gary Cooper represented the man that we could all become. On screen, he was a stoic badass cowboy that starred in westerns. Off screen, he was pretty much the same way. You might not be aware of the huge fight he was up against, but you can thank Gary Cooper for partially saving Hollywood as we know it.
I've never read Karl Marx, and I don't know the basis of communism beyond what I've picked up from hearsay. What I've heard, I don't like it.
I was trying to take this man away from the stand.
Before we get to that, I'll have to start a bit sooner. Gary Cooper, who's an iconic figure of the Hollywood Golden Age, became synonymous with masculinity in American cinema. And no, this wasn't like alpha male Andrew Tate masculinity. This was when masculinity was about values.
Men who explored Antarctica and froze to death, or the men who went and died in wars. They didn't want to. It wasn't about them. It was about something larger than themselves.
Well, all right, that's kind of correct, actually. Maybe this is Gary Cooper. Maybe we found him.
When's the last time that you can name a woman who did something that destroyed her own life for the good of larger society?
Then he says something like that and it makes people not like him. Never mind, still looking for Gary Cooper. Born in 1901 in Montana, Cooper grew up in a rugged environment that shaped his authentic persona. He started his film career as early as 1925 as a film extra and a stuntman. His rise to stardom in the 1930s and 1940s coincided with a time when traditional ideals of masculinity were celebrated, and Cooper embodied those qualities both on and off the screen.
You don't have to be a hero, not for me.
I'm not trying to be a hero. If you think I like this, you're crazy.
Cooper's influence extended beyond his lifetime, shaping the cultural narrative of what it meant to be a man in the mid-20th century. While modern interpretations of masculinity have evolved, Gary Cooper remains a timeless symbol of a classic ideal, a man of strength, principle, and quiet dignity. Across the history of cinema, the idea of what a real man looks like has been shaped and molded by whatever the culture demands of it. In the 50s and 60s, we had Gary Cooper and John Wayne. In the 70s, we had people like De Niro, Pacino, and Marlon Brando, who were more introspective characters, more morally complicated. In the 80s, we had big action stars, one-man army people like Schwarzenegger and Stallone. In the 90s, we had more charismatic, swagger type of sex appeal male characters like Brad Pitt and Will Smith, and for whatever reason, everybody looked like this, I don't know why. And in the 2010s and 2020s, which we live in today, things are a little bit different. The word misogynistic is thrown around quite a bit. It seems like any depiction of a man overpowering a woman physically or mentally is not going to cut it. Hollywood has a huge barrier to entry, so it makes sense that a lot of studios play by the rules, but it seems like they don't even know what the rules are because they're somehow saying Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill was sexist. You really couldn't put a female protagonist in there that wasn't so violent, you sexist pig. Why does she have to kill all the time? I don't know, maybe because it's a fucking samurai movie?
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?
I don't even understand that because it's not a stereotype that women are violent. But anyways, we're a far cry away from the Gary Cooper days when we look at men in cinema today. It seemed like Hollywood was starting to depict men as bumbling idiots that never knew what was going on, while women were the capable badasses that always had to hold their hands. Maybe one of the most egregious examples is the new season of True Detective. Many people regard the first season of True Detective as some of the best television ever made. Since then, some changes were made to the creative team, to say the least.
What attracted you about True Detective?
With the two True Detectives that are female now. We remember season 1 and Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. We're going to do something completely different.
Here's a quote from the new director. True Detective is male and it's sweaty. Night Country is cold, it's dark, and it's female. Now that's somebody that understands what made the first season so great great.
Was it the female-led character of this one that attracted you to it?
Yes.
You are part Cape Verdean, part Native American. Was that also an attractive calling point for you?
Absolutely, because the representation or lack thereof that we...
Okay, that's enough. I made a video talking about True Detective Season 1 and the art of miniseries, so watch my video. The link is in the description. Go, blah, blah, blah. Even when Hollywood remakes a movie from the past, it seems like they rewrite it to have the man less competent and have the woman a little bit more capable.
That's the bat suit, huh?
I need you to fix his suit.
Fix his suit?
The suit is literal perfection.
It's literal perfection.
Will be. When it fits a woman.
You're a female Bruce Wayne.
Awesome. Hilarious. Handsome.
You're a female Bruce Wayne. Awesome. Hilarious. Handsome.
What the fuck are you doing with your mouth? It seems like femininity is something they don't really embrace, and they'd rather have the woman fill the role of a typically masculine man. I think that says a lot about their true perspective on the matter, because if they actually embraced women, then they would embrace the qualities that come along with women. And the way they make fun of men is by giving them feminine characteristics, so at their core it seems like they're the sexist ones. The new Lion King movie panders in the same way. They show the upbringing of Scar and Mufasa. Mufasa was raised by the intelligent, balanced, and capable women, while Scar was raised by the lazy, oafy, dumb, and arrogant men. And that's their explanation on why Mufasa grew up to be a great hero and why Scar grew up to be a spiteful villain. I'm no expert in animals, but I thought they were going for realism. I don't think that's how it works in the wild.
Documentaries, and hopefully it will look like a live-action film and like a documentary.
And I never watched the Barbie movie, but when somebody explained the plot to me, I thought they were joking. Barbie versus the patriarchy. Matriarchies are better. The messaging is kind of crazy. Somehow we found ourselves in a place where it's men versus women, when it absolutely shouldn't be that way. My point being, films are a really good mirror to the society that we currently live in. And it seems as if we live in a culture right now that demonizes masculinity more than anything. For millennials and Gen Z, we might have seen films such as Fight Club that explore the empty vapidness of masculinity today.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no Great Depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
This message had a great cultural appeal at the time of its release, as it appealed to the men that felt they had no place in this world, at least not as a man. I remember telling a substitute teacher in high school that I liked Fight Club. His response was that he used to like it when he was younger, but as he found more purpose in life, the film didn't resonate with him as much. That sentiment confused me a lot because I didn't look at myself as somebody that didn't have purpose, nor did I think the film was preaching a message to a specific type of man. As someone growing up in that era, I thought that these themes were universally accepted. It wasn't until I got older that I realized Tyler Durden had a flawed perspective on the world, and he was a byproduct of a changing culture. This is the same type of effect that I see today when people idolize the Joker from the Todd Phillips movies. The character was always made to be a critique on society, but it turns out if the critique is accurate, there's going to be a subset of people that relate to the character and start to romanticize that behavior as if it's a character written just for them. Neither of these characters were meant to be idolized, so why do so many people do it? Well, I think a lot of it comes down to purpose, and specifically the purpose of young men. The value system that was upheld in the 50s is not the same value system we hold today, and I'm not so sure that we need to revert everything to the 50s, but it seems like we definitely have some work to do if a large audience of our young men are feeling disenfranchised enough to look at the Joker as someone to relate to. The changing of these tides, especially on screen, didn't happen all at once. It happened little by little, with each generation after the next noticing more and more change. The Sopranos dealt with many interesting themes, one of them being the changing of times, the shifting of society. For Tony, he looked at the cultural timestamp, which was Gary Cooper, and remembers a time where society reflected his essence.
They discriminate against all Italians as a group when they disallow Columbus.
Oh, will you fucking stop? Group. What the fuck happened to Gary Cooper? That's what I'd like to know.
He died.
Now that the world has moved on, Tony feels like he no longer belongs. The Sopranos did a fantastic job depicting this throughout the series. The concept itself of the mafia existing within a world that feels so familiar to all of us is a strange thing to witness. When it first aired, people didn't know whether it was supposed to be satirical or not. Tony would live his life in the mafia, killing people, running a large organized crime group, and then go home to his family and argue with his wife about buying the wrong orange juice from the grocery store.
It says with pulp.
You like it with pulp.
Not this much. I like the one that says Shumpo. The fuck was that for?
I'll write you up a list.
A man stuck in time with no Great War, no Great Depression, and struggling to find a sense of duty in a society that doesn't demand it from him. Before the release of Gary Cooper's High Noon, that statement couldn't be further from the truth. Pay attention to this part. It's important. As a country, we had recently gone through a world war and we're right in the center of a Cold War with Russia. America felt under attack at all times, and not just in fear of our physical safety, but also ideologically. Communist ideologies would intercept our media, our institutions, and even our schools as a means for the Soviets to win a propaganda war amongst our population. As it turns out, the best way to bring strength and unity to a population is to give them a common struggle. Self-pity, victimization, and social justice are all put on the back burner, as they don't matter at all to a country at war. But for Gary Cooper, his war was here at home. This time period would also give birth to a system and a political ideology called McCarthyism that would not only threaten to destroy the film industry, but our freedoms as we know it. It was spearheaded by Senator Joseph McCarthy. The HUAC was formed to get rid of all the communist influence, particularly in Hollywood. But then the HUAC proved to be a lot more sinister than anybody imagined. People like Ronald Reagan stood up against this and said that democracy can handle the difference of opinion without having to outlaw a certain political ideology.
Next on the list of witnesses is Ronald Reagan.
I will be frank with you that as a citizen, not like to see any political party outlawed on the basis of its political ideology, because we've spent 170 years in this country on the basis that democracy is strong enough to stand up and fight for itself.
One of the most useful tools in McCarthy's administration was someone by the name of Roy Cohn, who, if you don't know, was the person who mentored Donald Trump when he was younger into the man he is today. They made a whole movie about it. It's called The Apprentice. I don't think it's like historically accurate, but it's a pretty good movie. You should watch it. The film industry was deeply affected, with actors, writers, directors, and producers being subpoenaed to testify about their political affiliations. Those who refused to cooperate or were accused of communist ties were often blacklisted, effectively ending their careers or thrown in prison.
There were a couple of possible suicides as a result of it. There were a good deal of misery.
They subpoenaed a ton of huge names and brought a bunch of people to the stand, including Gary Cooper, who denied any ties to the Communist Party. They even had Walt Disney himself take the stand.
Didn't pull my punches on how I felt, and he evidently heard that I had called them all a bunch of communists, and I believe they are.
High-profile cases included the Hollywood 10, a group of screenwriters and directors who were jailed for contempt of Congress after refusing to answer the HUAC's questions.
The 10 were imprisoned. With hundreds more, they were blacklisted. Their livelihoods taken away.
Here are some of the people that were blacklisted during this time, along with many others. All of their careers were abruptly destroyed, and some people found themselves in prison without the need to submit evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. This system quickly molded into McCarthy having unchecked power that would be abused across multiple different media avenues. A lot of people felt like if you went against McCarthy, your career ended that very day, along with the threat of your freedom being taken away. The Hollywood world was filled with a bunch of people unwilling to act in fear of what it would do to them. If only there was somebody heroic enough to stand up to these people. The blacklisting era ultimately caused lasting harm to many careers and stifled artistic expression during a pivotal time in American cinema. As I mentioned before, this was all happening during the golden age of Hollywood, so imagine what the golden age of Hollywood would look like without all of this hindering people's creative expression. And ironically, this was the exact same practice that the fascist or communist countries were privy to at that time, which was the whole point that we were supposed to fight against. Hollywood was on the brink of collapse. McCarthyism seemed to go on uncontested, as people who spoke out against it would be considered a communist ally for arguing against the anti-communist protocols. This was until Gary Cooper in High Noon was released. Gary Cooper had always played the hero who never shied away and felt like it was his duty to do what was right no matter what personal cost was at stake. In the film, he embodies this. The entire film was not only an allegory to our duty as men in society, but also for the McCarthy situation which was plaguing Hollywood. Can you picture any big Hollywood star nowadays going against the popular political narrative? Because I really can't. In High Noon, Gary Cooper plays a man just married who left town in their time of need. A gang of vengeful outlaws are on their way, and Gary Cooper feels that it's his duty to return to the town and stand strong alongside the community. As he returns to help defend the town, he finds that the townsfolk are angry at his arrival. They didn't want him to rebel, and they feel threatened by the fact that he's willing to stand strong. They want to sit there in complacency and just allow the tyrant to take over. Their perspective was shows that standing strong individually was a futile effort, and if everybody wasn't willing to stand up, then there was really no point. It seemed that nobody was willing to act because they had no individual sense of duty. This ties very closely into the McCarthy situation, but it also stands true for a critique on society overall.
Gary Cooper. Now, there was an American, the strong, silent type. He did what he had to do. He faced down the Miller gang when none of those other assholes in town would lift a finger to help him. And did he complain? Did he say, oh, I come from this poor Texas, Irish, illiterate fucking background or whatever the fuck, so leave me the fuck out of it because my people got fucked over?
T, not for nothing, but you're getting a little confused here. That was a movie.
The movie can be interpreted as a critique of societal complacency and cowardice. He wasn't the typical Western hero that enjoyed confrontation. He was all of us. He was everyone around him, and he was telling people to unite against the tyrant who was McCarthy. Gary Cooper in the movie was willing to stand alone if needed in hopes that he could unite the town to act with him. By doing this and by relating the themes of the movie to the real-life McCarthyism, his performance in the film was allowing the real-life Gary Cooper to do the same thing. In a time where he could have legitimately been jailed, canceled, taken down, or labeled a communist, he stood there as the hero of Hollywood. Now, I'm not saying that he single-handedly ended McCarthyism, but he definitely played a role in public opinion as he stood there and actually took a stance against it, unlike a lot of people in the industry. And just like in High Noon, sometimes that's all it takes.
The real Gary Cooper, or anybody named Cooper, never suffered like the Italians.
If he was American around nowadays, he'd be a member of some victims group. The fundamentalist Christians, the abused cowboys, the gays, whatever the fuck.
He was gay, Gary Cooper?
No! Are you listening to me?
In 1954, McCarthyism was put to an end as it finally received the popular decision for people to act against it. It served as a reminder not to give any institution unchecked power, as it will almost certainly be taken advantage of. Just like the townsfolk in High Noon, everybody else knew what the right thing to do was. They all wanted to stand up for themselves, but nobody wanted to do it alone. Nobody wanted to stand in isolation. Nobody felt the exact individual duty to stand up by themselves. This is a good example of masculinity representing the culture as a whole, but do the depictions in cinema match what we need at the time or what we resonate with? And does it really matter? It's starting to seem like without struggle we end up creating our own, and when the culture doesn't respect those values anymore, we get people like The Rock basically assembled by a corporation. Someone like The Rock is too worried about his corporate sponsors to say what he really believes on a podcast or an interview. Everybody seems to be bought and paid for following the same ideology in lockstep. There's nobody promoting the values that we got from Gary Cooper back in the day because that's not very fashionable. There's a certain force of nature that masculinity can provide. Responsibility not only for yourself, but for those around you. When that's no longer ingrained in our culture, it seems that we all find ourselves asking the same question.
Whatever happened to Gary Cooper? The strong, silent type. That was an American. He wasn't in touch with his feelings. He just did what he had to do. See, what they didn't know was once they got Gary Cooper in touch with his feelings, that they wouldn't be able to shut him up. And then it's dysfunction this, and dysfunction that, and dysfunction motherfucking.
My name's CJ Soprano. I just want to thank everybody who made it to the end of the video. Please subscribe if you made it here. It means I got your attention for 18 minutes. It's not an easy thing to do. Let me know what you guys think down below. Seriously, I want to hear from you guys. Am I bugging? Let me know if I'm wrong. I know you guys will. Have a fantastic day, everybody.